I'm standing in my kitchen when my phone starts vibrating on the marble countertop. Not ringing. Not urgent. Just persistent. The late afternoon sun spills through the floor-to-ceiling windows, lighting up the quiet space behind me. A half-finished cup of coffee sits beside a baby bottle warmer. On the fridge, a photo is held up with a tiny blue magnet, my son's first smile, gummy and fearless. I wipe my hands on my silk blouse, the fabric cool against my skin, and glance at the screen. Unknown number. For a moment, I consider letting it buzz itself to silence. My life is peaceful now. Predictable. Carefully built. But something in my chest tightens, the kind of instinct only pain teaches you. I pick up. The message is short. Polite. Corporate. This is regarding the severance package finalized during Michael Hayes' termination. We need to confirm remaining beneficiary details. Michael Hayes. My husband. Former husband. The man who walked out when I was 8 weeks pregnant for his 26-year-old secretary. I lower myself into a chair, my free hand drifting instinctively to the baby monitor clipped at my waist. A soft breath crackles through the speaker. My son is sleeping. I smile, but there's irony in it. They think this message will reopen an old wound. They have no idea that what Michael called his clean exit became the very thing that saved my child and rebuilt me from the ashes he left behind. The smell of lemon cleaner still takes me back to that morning. I was standing in our bathroom, barefoot on cold tile, staring at 2 pink lines that refused to disappear. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to sit on the edge of the tub. I remember laughing, softly, nervously, because I'd been tracking my cycle for years, convincing myself it would take time. And then there it was. Immediate. Unmistakable. I pressed a hand to my stomach, not even flat yet, just familiar. Hello, I thought. You're real. Michael was already late for work. Again. I told myself I'd surprise him that night. Maybe cook his favorite pasta. Light a candle. Say it gently, like women do when they're hoping the moment will change everything. But the universe has a cruel sense of timing. That afternoon, I drove to his office to drop off the watch he'd forgotten. The receptionist smiled too quickly when she saw me. I remember noticing how quiet the floor was, too quiet for a Wednesday. I found them in the conference room. Michael's hand was on her waist. Her head was tilted in a way that said this wasn't new. Lauren Brooks, his secretary. He didn't even look shocked, just inconvenienced. What are you doing here, Claire? He asked, like I'd walked in during a meeting. My throat closed. The watch slipped from my fingers and hit the table with a sharp clink. I'm pregnant, I said. Lauren's face drained of color. Michael's didn't. He exhaled slowly, rubbed his forehead, and said the words that split my life clean in two. This isn't a good time. The ride home was a blur. I remember pulling over once to throw up, my whole body convulsing, not from morning sickness, but from the realization that the man I trusted had already left me long before he packed a bag. That night, he told me he was in love. That the baby was unfortunate timing. That Lauren understood him. 2 weeks later, divorce papers arrived. At my first prenatal appointment, I cried so hard the nurse held my hand and let me take as long as I needed. Before I left, she pressed the ultrasound printout into my palm. Whatever happens, she said gently, this little one already chose you. I sat in my car afterward, sunlight streaming through the windshield, and made a promise out loud. No matter how abandoned I felt, my child would never feel disposable. Michael called it a clean exit. That was his phrase, spoken across a polished oak table in a lawyer's office that smelled like coffee and power. He didn't look at my stomach, already rounding beneath my coat. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He talked numbers instead. His company had let him go quietly. No scandal. No press. Just a severance package large enough to protect their image and soothe his ego. And because I was his wife, still legally his wife at the time, I was entitled to part of it. At first, I didn't want the money. It felt dirty. Like hush money for heartbreak. But then I went home, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the floor of the nursery that used to be a guest room. I held the ultrasound photo in my hands and thought about daycare costs, medical bills, and the kind of future I refuse to let fear design. So I made a decision. If this money came from the worst moment of my life, it would become the foundation of the best one for my child. I didn't splurge. I didn't post. I didn't tell anyone. I met with a financial advisor recommended by a woman I barely knew, a single mother named Diane Whitaker, sharp-eyed and calm, who ran her own consulting firm. She didn't look at me like a victim. She looked at me like a woman with leverage. "You don't need to be reckless," she told me, sliding a yellow legal pad toward me. "You need to be strategic." Pregnancy was exhausting in ways no one prepares you for. I learned spreadsheets with my feet swollen, propped on pillows. I took calls between prenatal appointments. I studied market basics at 2 in the morning, one hand on my belly when the baby kicked, reminding me why I couldn't quit. There were nights I cried over the laptop. Nights I wondered if Michael was right, if I was naive to think I could do this alone. But then came the first small win. An investment that returned just enough to prove I wasn't guessing. Then another. I started consulting freelance, quietly, helping small startups organize operations, improve workflow, fix the kind of inefficiencies I'd watched Michael ignore for years. Turns out, proximity teaches you things. By the time my son was born, I had something that felt like oxygen. Control. I named him Noah. I worked during his naps. I rocked him with one arm and answered emails with the other. My life was smaller, quieter, but it was mine. When people asked how I was managing, I smiled and said, "Getting by." I let them believe I was surviving. Because sometimes the most powerful growth happens in silence, when no one is watching and failure isn't an option. I didn't expect to see Michael again in person. Not like that. The email came first, formal, overly polite, addressed to Mrs. Hayes, which made me smile before it made me pause. He wanted to discuss Noah and clear up some misunderstandings. He suggested meeting at my place, citing convenience. I almost laughed. He still thought I was living in something temporary, something modest, something apologetic. So I agreed. The day he arrived, I was calm in a way that surprised even me. Noah was down for his afternoon nap. The house was quiet, filled with warm light and soft neutral colors. On the walls hung modern art, pieces I'd collected slowly, intentionally. A balance sheet framed in my office, not as decoration, but as a reminder. When the doorbell rang, I didn't rush. I opened the door to find Michael standing there, Lauren beside him. She looked different, less polished, older in the eyes. Michael's gaze slid past me into the house, his expression tightening just slightly. "This is nice," he said. "Thank you," I replied evenly. "Come in." They walked through the space slowly, like people afraid to touch anything. Lauren's eyes caught on the baby toys arranged neatly in a corner. Wooden, tasteful, expensive. Michael noticed the office last. The glass desk. The dual monitors. The view of the city skyline beyond the windows. Neither of them spoke. We sat. I let the silence stretch. Finally, Michael cleared his throat. "I assumed things had been harder for you." I met his eyes. "Why?" He hesitated. Lauren shifted beside him. "I mean," he continued, "single motherhood isn't easy. I just wanted to make sure Noah was provided for." That was when I leaned forward. "Noah is more than provided for," I said calmly. "He's secure." I stood and walked into the office, returning with a slim folder. I placed it on the coffee table between us and slid it toward him. "What's this?" he asked. "Ownership documents," I said. "My firm. My investments. My accounts." Lauren frowned. Michael opened the folder. His face changed page by page. I watched the realization settle, the kind that arrives too late to matter. "The severance package," I continued, "was seed money. I turned it into something sustainable, profitable, something Noah will inherit without conditions." Michael looked up slowly. "You did all this alone?" I smiled. Not sharply. Not cruelly. I did it pregnant, exhausted, and underestimated. Lauren stood abruptly. "You never told me." "I didn't need to," I said gently. This isn't about you. Michael closed the folder, hands unsteady. I thought leaving would simplify things, he admitted. It did, I replied. For me. I walked to the baby monitor on the shelf and picked it up. Noah stirred on the screen, stretching, safe. This, I said quietly, is what you left behind. And for the first time I saw it. Regret, pure and unfiltered, written across the face of the man who once believed my life would shrink without him. Michael stayed seated long after Lauren excused herself and left. The door clicked shut behind her, and the house seemed to breathe again. He looked smaller without her beside him, less certain. The confidence he used to wear like a tailored suit now hung loose, uncomfortable. I want to be part of Noah's life, he said finally. I know I handled things badly, but I'm still his father. I nodded once. Not in agreement. In acknowledgement. You are, I said. And that's exactly why this conversation matters. I sat across from him, folding my hands in my lap. There was no tremor in them. That alone felt like victory. Noah will know you, I continued. But he will never see me disrespected. He will never hear excuses dressed up as explanations. And he will never learn that love means abandonment when things get complicated. Michael swallowed. These are my conditions. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. First, I said, communication goes through lawyers and a parenting app. Not late-night calls. Not guilt texts. Structure. He nodded slowly. Second, you contribute financially in a way that's consistent, not performative. No grand gestures. Just responsibility. Another nod. Third, I said, meeting his eyes, you don't introduce Noah to partners until they've been in your life long enough to prove stability. He is not an accessory to your redemption arc. That one stung. I could see it. And lastly, I added, you respect my decisions. My home. My time. I built this life. You don't get to critique it. He leaned back, exhaling. You've changed, he said quietly. I smiled, but there was sadness in it. I had to. The baby monitor crackled softly. Noah made a small sound, half dream, half sigh. Michael glanced at it. Can I see him? I considered the question carefully. Yes, I said. For 5 minutes. I led him to the nursery. He stood over the crib, staring down at the tiny human who had no idea how close he came to being born into chaos. Michael's voice broke. I never meant to hurt you. I know, I said. And I did. But intention doesn't erase impact. He left shortly after, quieter than when he arrived. That night, after Noah was asleep again, I sat alone on the couch, the ultrasound photo resting on the table beside me, the same one from years ago. I thought about the woman I'd been, the fear, the loneliness, and I realized something important. Power isn't revenge. It's boundaries. It's choosing peace over proving a point. It's knowing that you and your child are already enough. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that day. It became quiet. And quiet, I learned, is a kind of luxury. Michael kept his distance. He followed the rules. Sometimes he showed up early, sometimes awkward. Always careful now, like a man afraid to break something fragile he once didn't know how to hold. I didn't correct him. Growth has to come from its own discomfort. Noah grew fast. Faster than I expected. There were mornings filled with spilled cereal and laughter. Afternoons of stroller walks through the city. Evenings where I rocked him to sleep while the skyline blinked outside our windows. My calendar was full, but my heart was no longer heavy. One evening, after Noah fell asleep, I opened the small keepsake box I kept in my drawer. Inside was the ultrasound photo, the edges soft now, slightly bent. The nurse's words came back to me like a whisper from another lifetime. He already chose you. I smiled. Back then, I thought survival was the goal. I thought strength meant enduring pain without falling apart. I was wrong. Strength was learning to redirect pain into purpose. The money Michael thought would erase me became my education, my leverage, my safety net. It paid for sleepless nights turned into strategy, fear turned into focus, loss turned into legacy. It was never just a severance package. It was a gift. Not to me, but to the little boy sleeping peacefully down the hall, unaware that his very existence reshaped a woman who refused to be discarded. I walked into the nursery and watched Noah breathe, steady and sure. I brushed a finger over his tiny hand, and he curled his fingers around mine without waking. In that moment, I understood something with perfect clarity. I wasn't left behind. I was set free. Michael lost a wife he underestimated. Lauren lost a man who never learned loyalty. But my son? My son inherited a mother who turned abandonment into abundance, silence into strength, and heartbreak into a future no one could ever take from him. And if that isn't a gift, I don't know what is.